Previously on the Top 100.
There it is! They did it! 2,000 yards in one season.
They called him Gino the Giant because he was one of the biggest people in the league.
Look, Chuck, Jim Taylor wants the ball. I think Mr. Taylor changed his mind, wouldn't you?
You can truly say Lance Allworth's impact changed the NFL.
If we were able to watch him perform, I think we'd call him hands down the greatest player who ever lived.
When it comes to pass catching, here's the man they'll never replace. His name is Raymond Berry, and he has the surest hands in football.
This is the way you go after him. You're frothing from the mouth. You say, get him, get him.
The next thing I know, he pushes me down, takes the ball. I'm laying on the carpet in Miami. Looking up, he has my football running back the other way with his hands up in the air in my stadium.
Sid Luckman was the first man to throw for over 400 yards in a game. He threw on that day 7 touchdowns, a record that has never been broken.
Jim had the speed and mobility, weighing 275 and 280. That was the kind of athlete he was. He was a complete package.
This movie is rated R. Adult language and violence. Lots of it.
And now, the countdown continues.
Two players in the National Football League, every time they hit you, they tried to hurt you, and they did. One was a guy by the name of Dick Butkus, and the other is Night Train Lane. He once said, Jerry, there's never been a good tackle ever in the history of the league below the eyebrows.
I perfected my own way of tackling people. Just when they've been able to bowl me over, I would rip them and stop them right in their tracks.
He was the first guy to tackle with the face mask. The play wasn't successful unless he ripped your helmet off. So they made a rule. He then became, it was called the Night Train Lane necktie tackle. It was a clothesline. They then said the clothesline was illegal. You cannot do that. So then he decided that he would take his forearm, and as you came and he went to attack you, he would try to bust you. And he once said, if I could hit the man so hard and broke my arm, that would be a great play. This is a different type guy.
Dick Lane played receiver in junior college. He was as fast as a locomotive and got his nickname from the 1952 Buddy Morrow hit, Night Train. In the 50s and 60s, Lane was a versatile special teamer and defensive back for the Rams, Cardinals, and Lions. In his rookie year, Lane intercepted 14 passes in just a 12-game season. It remains the NFL's single-season interception record.
Night Train Lane was the first guy, bump and run. Night Train invented, they'll let you get open and then go steal the football. You will think you've got a play, and he will end up with the football. Do not throw in Night Train's area. Giant United says, I will not tolerate that. Night Train took it back.
The Colts try to come from behind, but Dick Night Train Lane derails the attempt.
Night Train Lane was criticized for a lot of things because he would take a chance. It did not change who he was. Night Train never saw a guy carrying the ball that he didn't go after and try to knock out. A guy catching the ball he did not try to knock out. Why does he have 68 interceptions? Not by playing the coverage like the coach told him to. You don't win the Kentucky Derby on a donkey with a whip. And if you got a thoroughbred, you let him go and you let him play. He's the best, greatest corner in the history of pro football.
Jack, I have come all the way from Mexico to see you, man. This is my dream.
When the Steelers drafted Jack Lambert out of Kent State, he carried barely 200 pounds on his 6'4" frame. The fledgling linebacker might not have made it in Pittsburgh's nest, but for the unlikely inspiration of Oakland's Mad Stork.
Everybody said, "Oh, Jack, you know, you're a good football player, but you don't weigh enough. You've got to be at least 235, 240 to play." Well, I just couldn't put the weight on. He was a great hope for me because when I saw him go into the pros, he was tall and skinny, like I was.
Over time now, there's kind of become this understanding that small running backs have an advantage because a lot of times linebackers can't see into the backfield. His height at middle linebacker may have been a positive in the reverse. He may have had a better view of what the offense was doing, and that might explain why he seemed always to be one step ahead of things. He just seemed to make every tackle. If the best player in the middle of the field is making all the plays on the best team, maybe this is the best defender in the league. On a team of the decade, I don't know even who's number 2 for the idea of being the middle linebacker on that roster.
I came out, and the tackle came on me right now, and I stuffed him.
You had him stuffed like this.
I stuffed him,
all the way
but he dipped in, went back outside, and was around the corner before I even got off the block.
He was an extremely intellectual linebacker, which I don't think was the association with him at the time, probably because he was toothless, and probably because he looked kind of like a madman. His greatest strength was his mind, so he's like John Rambo, I guess. He was certainly the most intimidating player on a pretty intimidating team.
Jarrella just missed his second field goal. Now Lambert's walking by. Here's Harris telling him something and grabs the kicker. And Lambert at 6'5" works him over.
During his 11-year career, Lambert won Defensive Rookie of the Year and Defensive MVP awards.
Switch it.
He made 9 straight Pro Bowls and was the man in the middle of the steel curtain for 4 Super Bowl wins.
That'll cool your ass off.
It's possible that Jack Ham was a greater outside linebacker than Lambert was as a middle linebacker. But I don't imagine opponents fearing Jack Ham the way they would fear Lambert. Pretty much every play, the quarterback was staring directly at Lambert, who had not only this very scary appearance, but this incredibly active appearance.
I made the comment earlier that we should put dresses on quarterbacks. Got a lot of play out of that one, you know. But I meant it.
Quarterbacks couldn't skirt past Lambert, who became a frequent visitor to opposing backfields and a permanent fixture in Steelers lore.
Pittsburgh likes to sort of perceive itself as having a certain kind of toughness, having a certain kind of team. Lambert really represents that, and there's never going to be a guy who replaces that in Pittsburgh. He will always be perceived as the greatest personification of what Steeler football is supposed to be like. That's what Lambert represents. The Steelers at their highest point.
He summed it up in his Hall of Fame when he talked to me, and he said,
"You took care of me as though you were taking care of your little brother."
And when he said that, I said, that's exactly what we are. We're like brothers. It was such an honor and a privilege to block for him.
As a runner, I can do a lot of things. I can run you over. I can shake you down. I can run around you. I can go through you if I had to.
Aikman handoff. Smith up the middle, breaks a tackle. Emmitt Smith breaking a beheading tackle. Touchdown, Cowboy.
I was amazed at what he could do from a vision standpoint and a balance standpoint. Whether it's a hand or something that gets down and props him back up, or sometimes he doesn't even get his hand down, but he can contort his body in a way where he regains his balance and is up and running.
He's going to score. Absolutely ridiculous.
And I don't think he ever got enough credit for his toughness. He was a tough runner. He didn't run out of bounds.
Emmitt Smith's determination was never on greater display than in the 1993 season finale against New York. The defending Super Bowl champion Cowboys needed a victory to clinch home field advantage for the NFC playoffs, when midway through the first quarter, Smith separated his shoulder.
He wants to go back in the game, but when you've got a bad shoulder, it affects everything you do. You're going to have shooting pain the rest of the game, and that's not even the part where you have a collision or you fall on it.
Every time I got hit, every time I hit the turf, all I could hear, just cracks just happening all in my chest and my shoulder. And tears are rolling down my eyes. I'm just trying to convince myself there's no pain. But I'm feeling all the pain.
He just kept fighting through it, and the stats that he put up, the numbers that he put up after that injury are unbelievable.
They'll never forget the day Emmitt Smith ran 32 times for 170 yards and caught 10 balls for 62 and did most of it with one arm.
For that same season of 1993, Smith was the NFL and Super Bowl MVP.
Aikman draw to Smith. Tackled the breaks away to the 10, to the 5. Touchdown, Emmitt Smith.
In all, he won 3 Super Bowl rings and scored 175 career touchdowns, second in NFL history only to Jerry Rice's 208. These accomplishments are astounding, and yet they are only one portion of the mountain Emmitt Smith climbed during the greatest individual achievement of his career.
For Emmitt to walk into the NFL as a rookie and say, when I leave this game, I'm going to be the NFL's all-time leading rusher. That's a great goal to have, but that's Walter Payton's record.
And Emmitt Smith has just surpassed Tony Dorsett.
I think a lot of people felt that it was one of those records that was set and was going to last.
And Emmitt Smith has now passed Barry Sanders into second place on the NFL's all-time rushing list. It's a cloudy 67-degree day at Texas Stadium.
You're going to see some second and third effort, I think, out of him today. He desperately wants this record down.
It's not just any other Sunday. Emmitt Smith has eclipsed Walter Payton as the NFL's all-time rushing leader, and somewhere, sweetness is smiling.
To be there that day, there was such a sense of pride. And it was like when we hugged and embraced, it was, my little brother had done it.
I prepared for him probably more than any person I ever prepared for.
Watch number 64, Jerry Kramer of the Packers. He hooks number 74, Merlin Olsen, with his arm.
He never let up. He never eased up. He never took it easy. He was just there constantly. For a guy that weighed close to 300 pounds, he had great agility and great athletic instinct. He had a great head slap. You know, he had put that right hand up against your ear hole on your helmet, so it was kind of half boxing match and half football. He had the ability to pull and move you pretty well, but he also had the ability to stay in place and take care of his position, his responsibility. So the combination of trying to get around a guy and still protect that territory is something he did very well.
Merlin Olsen played in 15 seasons, made 14 Pro Bowls, and never missed a game. He was part of one of the most famous defensive lines in NFL history, the fearsome foursome. And while Deacon Jones, number 75, got most of the hype, it was Olsen who did much of the heavy lifting.
When we played the fearsome foursome, Merlin would kind of patrol the neighborhood, and Deke would do whatever he needed to do. And Deke had very limited responsibilities because Merlin backed him up and took care of everything he didn't do.
While Jones is an arrow, Olsen is the anchor. Taking on a triple team and stacking the play at his feet. Monarch of the middle ground.
After his retirement in 1976, he fashioned a TV career as an analyst and actor. Fittingly, most of the roles he played were quiet men of impeccable character.
Well, I think it's possible to separate the game on the field from the person off the field. And I'm not a violent person by nature. I really detest violence in many ways. But my job requires that I do certain things, and I made some commitments to doing that job as well as I possibly could.
Merlin was not only a complete ball player, he was a pretty complete human being. Merlin was bright, had a Phi Beta Kappa, a master's degree in economics, just had a great heart and a great motor and a great mind and a great work ethic. He just never stopped.
Bob lived right across the street from me, and you know, he had his own little dark room in his house, and he just loved photography.
All right, next man.
I guarantee you nobody ever kidded him about, you know, being a photographer. You know, when you have a guy that's that big and that much of a player, you know, whatever he wanted to do, he could do it. Nobody could beat him off the ball. Centers would try to choke block him, and the guard would pull, and they couldn't reach him, and he'd be in the backfield and just cause so much havoc.
Bob Lilly was the first draft choice in Dallas Cowboys history, and the first Cowboy in the Hall of Fame. He played 14 seasons and made 11 Pro Bowls. The only thing he didn't do was look the part.
Had no muscle definition. You know, he didn't have Popeye muscles and all those things. He was just an ordinary looking person, and you really didn't think when you look at him that this guy was a football player. And yet he was the strongest guy on the team. You combine that strength with the quickness that he had, he was just impossible for people to block him one-on-one.
Rudy handed off to Willard, and before we could say it, Lilly had Willard tangled down in his legs. Here's one of the great original Cowboys.
Beginning in 1966, the Cowboys made the playoffs 5 straight years, including 3 championship games, but couldn't win it all. Following Super Bowl V, the frustration of Dallas's defensive star turned photographer was captured in an indelible image.
don't think I've ever seen anybody throw a football helmet that far. That's what made the championship against Miami the next year so rewarding for all of us, because we'd been so close for so many years. Bob Lilly just dominated the game. The sacking of Bob Greasy was, one of the big plays.
The Cowboys finally won their championship. The man called Mr. Cowboy would soon ride off into the sunset to pursue his passion for photography.
I've got a wonderful picture that I took out of these big sequoia trees. They were strong and beautiful. They were rough, a little bit on the outside, the bark, kind of like football players.
And I want to wish everybody happy holidays.
I was like 16 years old, and I went to see him, believe it or not, at Hooters, where they were hosting the Dan Marino show. And I told him that I was a quarterback and I was a big fan. And I'll never forget this. He put his hand right here and said, "Son, you're going to be a good one, young man. You're going to be a good one." He's my favorite football player of all time, and I grew up in Miami watching him every Sunday.
180! 180! Touch! Marino takes the snapping back. Oh, yes, sir!
And many years later, when I came to New York, and obviously 3 was not available because of Mr. Babe Ruth, I immediately thought of wearing number 13 in honor of Dan.
Dan Marino was the 6th quarterback selected in the 1983 NFL Draft. In only his 2nd year, he shattered the single-season records for passing yards and touchdowns, and he led the Dolphins to Super Bowl 19.
There is no doubt in my mind after that game, I felt I would be back next year, the year after, and be in a lot of Super Bowls. I think we took it for granted a little bit that we would definitely be back. 3 or 4 years after that time, I started to realize this might be a little tougher than I thought.
Marino would continue to break records, but would never return to the Super Bowl.
Most great quarterbacks are judged on winning a championship or not. Whether it's fair or not, that's another conversation. It's funny because football is a team sport, but when you're the quarterback, they almost treat you like an individual sport, like tennis or golf. I'm the most loyal Dan Marino fan you're ever gonna meet, so it doesn't take anything away from it.
Let's get a drive going, man. Let's get a drive going and score some damn points.
Here's a guy that had, more passion and more desire than anyone. I remember so many games. I remember 1985 Monday Night Football at the Orange Bowl when they beat the undefeated Chicago Bears on a Monday night. I think he threw for like 400 yards. And then I remember some of the classic games against the Jets where they would go back and forth, back and forth. One game he threw a 50-yard lob pass to Mark Duper and they won the game. I mean, you live every moment with those because at the time I was a teenager and a big Dolphin fan, and those were exciting days.
30 seconds to go. I believe Marino is saying I'm going to spike it. Marino takes the snap from center. He's looking. He throws. All right! Touchdown, Dolphins! Yes, yes! I know you like that call.
When Dan Marino retired in 1999, he held every meaningful career record for a quarterback. Most passing yards, completions, and touchdowns.
He has the granddaddy of them all now. Most touchdown passes ever.
He's great. I wish I can get another 10 years of watching Dan Marino play football. And since he retired, I've never really gone back or watched the Dolphins. It's hard. It's like having to watch the Orioles without Cal Ripken.
What a joy it has been to watch that man play football.
Before the countdown continues, here's a look back at numbers 30 to 25. Number 30, One of the most devastating tacklers in NFL history, Night Train Lane. Number 29, Jack Lambert. Number 28, all-time rushing leader, Emmitt Smith. Number 27, 14-time Pro Bowler, Merlin Olsen. Number 26, Bob Lilly. Number 25, the 1984 NFL MVP, Dan Marino. And now, number 24.
He actually used to snort, and you'd get down the line and, liquids would be coming out of his face. John was the kind of guy that he wanted to take your nose off, let alone beat you. That's how he played the game. John was, one of the meaner guys to play against. It's so funny because off the field, John was a sweetheart. When he stepped between the lines, he had a different demeanor. He was going to eat your heart out if he could because he wanted to win. If you stood in front of him, he was going to put you on the ground, That was John's M.O.
Once I got on that football field, it was like a world of its own, and I could just immerse myself in that environment. No one could touch me.
His technique was textbook. His toughness, legendary. His athleticism, unparalleled at the guard position.
Being that aggressive, especially on the run, sometimes hurts you in a pass blocking situation. But Hanna was built like a block wall. And he was very thick from the waist down.
His NFL role model was Green Bay Packer guard Fred Thurston, here leading the legendary power sweep in Super Bowl I. Like Thurston, John Hanna led the way.
The one thing about him is his feet were always under him. John could actually turn it up inside to where he was always had his feet under him, and that was always under control. And the Patriots did a lot with him, all because of his athleticism.
Joe Klecko lined up against John Hanna twice every season.
Beating him was fun, but boy, Lord, after it, you're going to have to pay a price for it. There's not many times my number on the back of my jersey got dirty, But I do remember this one time, he popped me, and he caught me right under the chin, and he landed me on my back. He hit me so hard, it was unbelievable. And it was the first time ever, and I have a picture of it. The back of my jersey was dirty. And I used to pride myself in that because I, not be able to put on your back. But that day, John just actually buried me and put me right on my back. You didn't want to be in front of him because he was coming after you. And I just pity them poor linebackers because he used to just bury him.
In 1978, the New England Patriots set a single-season NFL record that still stands, rushing for 3,165 yards. A closer look at the moments during which this mark was established often reveals John Hanna immobilizing other large men, even future Hall of Famers like himself.
My goal was very simple. I wanted to be the best offensive guard that ever played football. That was pure and simple.
People often talk about him sort of as your nemesis.
That's accurate. I like John. My wife doesn't like John. Not in a mean-spirited way. She just didn't like the things that he was able to do against our football teams. Oh, God, I don't want to talk about John Elway, she says. I give him all the credit in the world because he pulled off some magic in those years.
This is our opportunity to get it done right now with the defense, the best in the league.
Elway's got the ball to the end zone.
John Elway is the NFL's all-time leader in fourth quarter comebacks with 47. 9 of them came against teams coached by Marty Schottenheimer.
John Elway has done it again.
I don't know that I would say he was solely my arch rival, but clearly he was a guy who, going head-to-head with him, we came up on the short end of it more often than not.
Time after time after time, he does it. And he has just bitten the Chiefs again.
Elway's most memorable late-game rally against Schottenheimer came in the 1986 AFC Championship game.
And the Broncos are 98 yards away from where they need to go.
Elway threaded the needle for 22 yards, and the Chiefs keep moving.
The drive was an unbelievable thing. He just kept making plays. It was the beginning of the mystique of Elway and his ability to come from behind.
42 seconds to go. The look, the throw. Touchdown, the Mark Jackson 98.5-yard drive.
You just shake your head. I mean, what are you going to do?
Never say never.
They are never in a position in which they didn't feel like they had a chance to win the game. Well, why? Because look who's playing quarterback for them.
And the Denver Broncos with another fantastic comeback.
When Elway retired, his 148 victories were the most ever by an NFL quarterback.
He could take a bad play and turn it into a good one. He had the athletic mobility to get out of trouble.
Elway scrambles away, passes on the move, touchdown.
And that's when he was really dangerous. You let him get out of that pocket, and all of a sudden somebody comes open somewhere, and he's able to make the throw to win the game.
Steps up in the pocket, looking long. Here goes the pass. Rod Smith up. He got it. Broncos win.
Does that better than anybody else.
He had the great arm strength.
And he'll run. He's up, passes on the move. Touchdown. Only Elway can pull that off.
I've never seen a guy move that kind of arm in my life. The ball moved so fast, I turned my head and it was there. This is about as good a throw as I've ever seen him make.
But for all his success, Elway was dogged by failure. 3 humbling Super Bowl losses created the perception that the comeback kid was a big game bust. This criticism persisted until, at the age of 37, he led the Broncos to victory in Super Bowl 32.
Come on, Jack, come on. Inside the 10. Head first. He flies inside the 5-yard line.
This one's for John.
The following season, Elway repeated the feat and was named MVP of Super Bowl 33.
Deep the middle of the field. Rod Smith's got it.
In that situation where everything's against you and no one's expecting you to do it and you get it done, that's exactly what you play for. That is the point in time in everybody's career that I think they would like to be able to freeze, because it's a feeling which is unbelievable.
The best quarterbacks ultimately find a way to win, and that's what separates the truly great quarterbacks from the ones that are very, very good. In the era in which I coached, he was clearly the #1 guy in that regard.
John Elway has done it again.
This guy will go down as the greatest come-from-behind player in National Football League history.
In 1971, Billy D. Williams played the role of Gale Sayers in the critically acclaimed film Brian's Song, the inspiring true story of the friendship between Sayers and teammate Brian Piccolo, who is dying of cancer.
It's a classic. People, even today, remember the performance. I was always, quietly watching Gale, trying to pick up certain idiosyncrasies. I always sort of equated his running style to ballet, Nijinsky. You know, he had that kind of beauty. I loved watching him run. It's poetry. Very elusive. You know, unlike, let's say, Jim Brown, who was, you know, he carried about 14 people on his back. When he ran, it was like watching one person turn into two people.
In 1965, the Kansas Comet had the 49ers seeing double when he blazed across a rain-soaked Wrigley Field, scoring 6 touchdowns to tie the NFL single-game record.
Give me 18 inches of daylight. That's all I need. I never went on a practice field and worked on faking left, going right, or turning around, that type of thing. Many times there'd be a fellow coming from my blind side, and no way I could see him, but I could feel it. There's times that I would make a move, and I couldn't explain it, but, you know, it's a God-given instinct to do things like that.
You know, I'm a painter, so what you learn when you're a painter is that you paint your broad strokes, which is obvious to the eye, and then you paint the subtleties, the nuances. That's where the story is being told. That's what draws people in. That's what makes people pay attention. Gale, he had a natural subtlety in the way he performed on a football field. You couldn't take your eyes off of him. You don't see that all the time. I mean, it's unusual.
Brilliant but fleeting, Sayers' career lasted just 68 games. In his 4th season, he tore several ligaments in his right knee and was never the same runner again. However, like Williams' performance in Brian's song, Sayers' work still resonates.
Watching him run was one of the most beautiful, special experiences I've ever had in my life. That's indelible greatness.
Before the countdown continues, here's a look back at numbers 30 to 22. Number 30, Night Train Lane. Number 29, the Steel Curtains' fearsome middle linebacker, Jack Lambert. Number 28, Emmitt Smith.
Spins across the 25 and breaks a tackle.
Number 27, Merlin Olsen.
I really detest violence in many ways, but my job requires that I do certain things, and I made some commitments to doing that job as well as I possibly could.
Number 26, the player known as Mr. Cowboy, Bob Lilly. Number 25, Dan Marino.
He's looking. He's under some pressure. Steps out to the right side, throws into the end zone, and it is caught. It's a touchdown! Dolphins! Oh, my God!
Number 24, 10-time All-Pro guard, John Hanna. Number 23, John Elway.
At first, he dives inside the 5-yard line.
Number 22, Gale Sayers. And now, number 21.
I think of a winner, champion. You know, those are the first things that come to mind when you mention his name, for what he's been able to do in his career. I think champion.
Tom Brady had 3 Super Bowl rings faster than any quarterback in NFL history, winning his 3rd before he turned 28 years old.
You know, the one that stands out the most is probably his first time he won. Leading the team down the field when time was running out, you could just see in his face that he remained calm. You know, as a teammate, if you're looking at the leader and he's calm, it rubs off on everybody else.
4 months prior to Super Bowl 36, Brady was still an unknown 6th-round draft pick. That all changed after he orchestrated a game-winning drive to complete one of the greatest upsets in Super Bowl history.
The ultimate feeling when you're playing a team sport to win a championship. Once you've won, you want to experience that again. If you're fortunate enough to win earlier in your career, that's all you want to do.
Just 2 years after his Super Bowl debut, Brady performed a championship encore.
Showing up ain't over yet. We gotta get us another. How would that do with that quarterback? No, sir. Don't count on it being over.
Snap, ball down, kick up, kick is on the way, kick is good! What a valiant effort by the Carolina Panthers. But it was just too much for them to stop Tom Brady and company on their final drive.
The thing with Tom, and like you say with any great athletes, is he works extremely hard.
Gotta start competing, huh? Start playing with the fire, all of us. We are not finished! We are not finished, fellas! Rise up! Hey, take it to another level, all right?
You know, I think as an athlete in any sport, you admire guys that are consistent at it. You know, I think a lot of people can have a great year, but if you want to maintain that over a course of 10, 15 years, that's when it becomes difficult.
Brady led the Patriots to an NFL record 21 straight wins over 2 seasons, and to a perfect 16-0 regular season in 2007, during which he set the single-season NFL record by throwing 50 touchdowns. Brady is a 2-time Super Bowl MVP. In 2004, he joined Troy Aikman as the only quarterbacks in history to win 3 Super Bowls in 4 seasons.
The only way you can maintain a certain level of play is you can never be satisfied with what you've done. You have to look forward to the next challenge, and I think he continues to do that.
I got this ring and I looked at it, and it's the most beautiful ring I've ever seen. To think of the experience, to think of the journey, it culminates in playing in a Super Bowl. But you know what my favorite ring is? The next one. That's my favorite.
On the next episode of Top 100.
He didn't want to come out, ever. It didn't matter what was broken.
He has that umph, that thing you can't describe. It's an eloquence that's just, it stupefies you.
What a beautiful little play!
And that body position, leverage, explosion of a cobra.
Am I just trying to get there to make a play? Or am I trying to get there to break your will?